There are moments in life when silence speaks louder than words. You give your heart, your time, and your loyalty to someone only to watch them walk away as if none of it mattered. And yet, something strange happens when you finally let go, when you stop chasing, stop waiting, and begin living for yourself. That is often the moment they come back, not because they suddenly discovered a new kind of love, but because your absence revealed a truth they refused to face when you were near. This is not about playing games or seeking revenge. It is about understanding human psychology, about recognizing how people often fail to appreciate what is constant until it becomes distant. When you move on, when your life starts to thrive without them, it creates a mirror they cannot escape. They begin to see who you were, what you gave, and what they lost. But the deeper lesson is not about her return, it's about your transformation. Because the man who waits is stuck in dependency, but the man who moves forward discovers freedom, strength, and self-respect. That shift changes everything. And sometimes it changes her too. When a woman comes back after you have finally moved on, it is not some magical twist of fate. It is a deeply human response rooted in psychology, timing, and the way value is often only recognized through absence. People tend to overlook what is present, not because it is unworthy, but because the mind becomes numb to what it has easy access to. This is one of the most painful truths about relationships. When you were fully available, when you gave her all your time, all your energy, all your devotion, she felt secure enough to underestimate it. She thought it would always be there. She thought you would always be waiting. It is only when you break that pattern, when you stop orbiting around her world, that she is forced to confront a reality she once ignored. Your value was not in what you promised, but in who you are, and losing that leaves a void she cannot easily fill. This is why moving on has such a powerful effect. It is not about manipulation. It is not about trying to make her jealous or prove a point. It is about reclaiming yourself, redirecting your energy away from someone who took it for granted and placing it back into your own life. You begin to grow again. You pursue goals, build new connections, and rediscover the parts of yourself that existed before her. That self-restoration radiates confidence, and confidence is magnetic. Ironically, it is often at this point, when you no longer need her validation, that she feels the pull of what she once dismissed. The psychology behind this is simple. Human beings are wired to desire what they can no longer easily possess. Scarcity heightens value. Just as people rush to buy something when it is labeled limited edition, the same applies emotionally. When your presence becomes scarce, when your attention is no longer freely available, it forces her to reassess. She remembers the warmth of your care, the reliability of your love, and the stability you once offered. What once felt like too much suddenly begins to look like everything I wanted but didn't see clearly at the time. But this is where many men make a mistake. They interpret her return as proof of love, when in truth it may simply be proof of loss. There is a difference between someone loving you for who you are and someone wanting you because they missed the comfort you provided. You must ask yourself, is she coming back out of genuine transformation, or is she returning because life without you revealed an emptiness she wants you to fill again? That distinction matters because if you confuse longing with love, you risk repeating the same cycle that broke you in the first place. Now, think about this personally. Have you ever noticed how much more attractive someone becomes once they are no longer available to you? Maybe you had a friend, a partner, or even an opportunity that you ignored until it was gone. Suddenly, in its absence, your mind magnified its worth. That is not love. It is recognition through loss. It is the brain catching up to what the heart neglected. And this is precisely what happens when you move on. Moving on is not about forgetting someone. It is about detaching your sense of worth from their recognition. When you stop living to be noticed by her, you begin living to fulfill yourself. That shift makes you powerful. You become a man defined not by who stays or leaves, but by the direction of your own path. And from that strength, you no longer ask, will she come back? But instead, do I even want her back? That is a question rooted in self-respect, and self-respect is the foundation of freedom. So, when she returns, understand this. It is not your responsibility to accept her simply because she realizes your worth too late. Her return is a reflection of her journey, not proof of her permanence. What matters more is your journey, the man you became in her absence, the life you built when you stopped waiting, and the wisdom you gained from the pain. Because sometimes The greatest gift in her return is not her presence, but the clarity it gives you about how far you have come without her. When we talk about the moment she comes back after you've moved on, we must explore the deeper psychological dynamics at play. Not just hers, but yours as well. Because the truth is, when you move on, you change in ways that are not always visible at first. You no longer act from desperation. You no longer cling to someone who has walked away. And you no longer live with the silent hope that she will someday notice the depth of your love. Instead, you begin to rebuild your life from the ground up. And in that rebuilding process, your very energy transforms. You stop being the man waiting in the shadows, and you become the man standing in his own light. That shift is powerful because human attraction is not just about looks, words, or gestures. It is about energy. And when your energy shifts from dependence to independence, from longing to self-respect, it alters how others perceive you, including the one who left. Consider this when you were at your lowest, chasing her, pleading for her attention. You were radiating lack. You were communicating without words that her presence was essential for your happiness. And paradoxically, that kind of attachment repels. People instinctively feel when they are being leaned on too heavily, and instead of drawing them closer, it often drives them further away. But when you move on, you no longer radiate lack, you radiate abundance. You start giving energy to your goals, your friendships, your passions. You begin to walk with a posture of purpose. And in that posture, she sees a version of you that is no longer begging to be chosen, but has already chosen himself. That is when curiosity awakens in her. What changed in him? Why does he no longer need me the way he once did? At a deeper level, this moment teaches us something crucial about human nature. People are not always drawn to who treats them the best, but to who respects themselves the most. This is a sobering truth for men to accept, because many of you were taught that if you love enough, give enough, sacrifice enough, she will recognize your value. But reality often works differently. Love without boundaries is not seen as love. It is seen as weakness. Sacrifice without self-respect is not admired. It is taken for granted. Only when you draw a line and reclaim yourself does the other person realize that what you gave was not guaranteed and what you offered came at a cost. That cost was you. Ask yourself this: why is it that the moment you stop waiting, the moment you stop clinging, the moment you stop trying to prove your worth, that is the exact moment she notices you again? It's because people subconsciously value what cannot be controlled. When you no longer orbit around her, when you live for yourself, she feels the loss of power she once held. That power used to come from knowing you would always be there, no matter how she treated you. But now, that power is gone. And in its place is the realization that she misjudged you, that you were not weak, you were loyal, you were not disposable, you were rare, and losing you was not a temporary inconvenience, but a permanent mistake. However, this is where caution is needed. Her coming back is not always a sign of transformation. It can also be a reaction to fear. Fear of regret, fear of missing out, fear of watching you give the love she took for granted to someone else. You must learn to distinguish between love that is rooted in genuine growth and love that is rooted in fear of loss. Because if you confuse the two, you risk stepping back into a relationship that has not truly changed. And then history will repeat itself. So the lesson here is not about celebrating her return, but about celebrating your evolution. The true victory is not that she wants you again, but that you no longer need her validation to feel whole. You moved on because you finally understood that your worth does not depend on her recognition. You built yourself into a man who can stand alone, and it is that strength that makes her want to come back. But now the choice lies with you. Will you allow her return to dictate your path? Or will you stay rooted in the man you've become? This is where maturity is tested. Because many men, in the moment of her return, are tempted to abandon their growth and rush back into old patterns. But the wise man asks a different question. What does her return reveal about me? Does it show me how far I've come? Does it confirm the power of self-respect? Or does it tempt me to go backward into a version of myself I no longer wish to be? That question matters because it determines whether her return is a second chance or simply a second wound. And so when she comes back, remember, the most important thing is not her change of heart, but your change of perspective. She may return, but you are no longer the same man she left. You are stronger now, wiser now, and freer now. And in that strength lies the ultimate power, not just to decide whether to take her back, but to know deep within yourself that even if she leaves again, you will never lose yourself. When she comes back after you've moved on, it isn't just about her. It's also about you recognizing the kind of man you've become through the process of loss and growth. Too often, men make the mistake of believing that life is about holding on, about fighting to keep someone who clearly doesn't want to stay. But the truth is, strength isn't found in clinging. It's found in letting go. It's found in the willingness to face the silence, the emptiness, and the pain, and yet still choosing to rebuild your life piece by piece. When you move on, you prove to yourself that you don't need anyone to complete you because you've learned how to stand complete within yourself. That lesson, once understood, becomes unshakable. The paradox is that this strength, the very independence that comes from letting go, is the same thing that draws her attention back to you. Not because you manipulated her into feeling it, not because you played games, but because genuine growth has a magnetic quality. Human beings can sense when someone has risen above their need for external validation. It's like a flame. It doesn't beg for attention. It simply burns, and people are drawn to its light. When you reach that point of self-respect, you carry yourself differently. You speak with more certainty, you walk with more confidence, and you no longer entertain situations that diminish your worth. And that shift cannot go unnoticed, not even by the person who once overlooked you. But here's the deeper question. Why do people often only realize what they had once it's gone? Psychologically, it comes down to scarcity and contrast. While you were always available, always giving, always forgiving, she couldn't feel the true value of your presence. You became predictable, a constant she thought would never disappear. But when you withdrew, when you stopped waiting, when you truly moved on, she experienced contrast. Suddenly, the energy she was used to receiving no longer flowed her way. And scarcity made her recognize its value. It's not that she couldn't see your worth before. It's that she took it for granted because she believed it would always be there. Only absence had the power to open her eyes. Now, this dynamic can be dangerous if misunderstood. Some men hear this and think the key to regaining power is to pretend they've moved on, to play a role, to act distant in hopes of drawing her back. But that is not real growth. That's manipulation. And manipulation never leads to lasting strength, only temporary illusions. What truly matters is authentic movement forward, building a life so full, so meaningful, that her presence or absence no longer defines your happiness. Only then does her return hold any significance because it no longer comes from your desperation. It comes from her recognition of who you've become. At the same time, her return is not necessarily proof of her transformation. This is where discernment becomes critical. A woman may come back because she has genuinely grown, matured, and realized the depth of your character. But she may also come back out of loneliness, jealousy, or fear of regret. She may return not because she truly loves you, but because she cannot accept the idea of you giving your love to someone else. If you mistake that for genuine love, you may fall back into the same cycle that once broke you. That is why moving on is essential, because it gives you the clarity to see her intentions, not through the fog of longing, but through the lens of strength. Think about this. When you were waiting, when you were longing, you would have accepted her back under any conditions. You would have welcomed her with open arms, no questions asked, because your hunger for her outweighed your concern for your own well-being. But now, after moving on, you see differently. You ask harder questions. Why has she come back? Has she changed? Do her actions align with her words? Does her return honor the man I've become? Or does it simply serve her comfort? These questions are the mark of growth. They separate the man who is ruled by emotion from the man who is guided by wisdom. And let's not forget, the greatest gift of moving on is not that she may return, but that you no longer need her return to validate your journey. Her choices are no longer the measure of your worth. Whether she stays away forever or comes back tomorrow, you are already whole. You are already strong. You are already enough. And when a man reaches that state, he becomes unshakable because his identity is no longer tied to the approval or affection of another person. So when she does come back, you don't meet her with desperation. You meet her with calm. You don't rush to surrender your heart again. You take time to observe. You don't ask, will she stay this time? You ask, do I even want her in the life I've built without her? That is the power of moving on. It shifts the focus from her decision to your decision, from her power over you to your power over yourself. And in the end, whether you let her back in or not, the truth remains. The man you've become by moving on is far greater than the man who once waited for her to choose him. There comes a moment in every man's life when he realizes that love cannot be forced, that no matter how much he gave, how loyal he remained, or how patient he was, the other person has the freedom to walk away. That realization hurts. It feels like a rejection not only of your love, but of your very being. Yet, what separates those who stay broken from those who rise is what they choose to do with that pain. When she leaves, you face two paths. One, where you remain trapped in longing, endlessly waiting for her to return, and another where you allow the loss to transform you into someone stronger, wiser, and more grounded. Choosing the latter is not easy. It requires self-discipline, self-reflection, and the courage to walk alone. But it is precisely in walking that road of solitude that you discover the strength she never saw in you when you were at your lowest. What's fascinating is how often life works with paradoxes. The very act of detaching from her, the decision to stop chasing, stop pleading, and stop building your identity around her becomes the catalyst for her return. Why? Because when you detach, you restore balance. Relationships thrive on polarity. Attraction is fueled by strength, independence, and presence. When you were consumed with her absence, you gave away all of that power. You showed her through your actions, even if silently, that your world revolved around her choices. That kind of energy does not inspire respect or attraction. But when you redirect your focus inward, building your career, nurturing your health, deepening your purpose, you exude a different kind of energy. You no longer orbit around her. You stand as your own center. And paradoxically, it is at that moment of independence that her attention returns. But here's the hard truth. Many men avoid facing her return does not guarantee her love has matured. Sometimes she returns not because she has realized your worth, but because she feels the emptiness of losing the attention you once poured into her. Sometimes she comes back because the other doors she tried to walk through did not satisfy her. And sometimes she comes back simply because she cannot accept the fact that you built a life without her. This is why moving on is not just about healing, it's also about gaining discernment. You must learn to see her return not as an automatic victory, but as a test. The test is simple. Will you fall back into the man who once lost himself for her, or will you remain the man who discovered himself without her? This is where self-respect becomes your anchor. Respect for yourself means you no longer accept breadcrumbs of affection. You no longer allow someone to walk in and out of your life as they please, leaving destruction behind. Respect means you measure actions, not just words. If she returns with promises, but no change, you see it for what it is, another cycle waiting to repeat itself. But if she returns with humility, with consistent effort, with a willingness to grow alongside you, then you can weigh whether her presence adds to the life you've already built. The key is this: her return is no longer the deciding factor of your happiness. You are. And isn't that the deepest transformation? At first, you believed her love was the source of your fulfillment. When she left, you felt shattered because you tied your identity to her acceptance. But as you moved on, you discovered that true fulfillment comes from living in alignment with your values, from pursuing your potential, from carrying yourself with dignity. That inner strength became your foundation. And once you have built that foundation, no person, whether they come, leave, or return, can shake it. You stand firm, not because of who loves you, but because of who you have become. It's also important to recognize the broader lesson hidden in this experience. People often value what they cannot control. When you were constantly available, when you tolerated her distance, when you accepted her half-hearted effort, you were easy to overlook. But when you took back control of your life, when you set boundaries, when you stopped giving her unlimited access to your heart, you became someone she could no longer control. That loss of control awakens something in her. It forces her to confront the reality that you are no longer hers to command. That realization stings, and it is often the very trigger that compels her to return. But whether or not you allow her back into your dependent life will on how much you've grown in her absence. So the question you must ask yourself is this: what kind of man do you want to be when she returns? The man who hands over his power the moment she smiles at him again? Or the man who listens, observes, and decides whether her presence truly aligns with his future? The first path leads back into chains. The second path affirms your freedom. And freedom once tasted is too valuable to trade for temporary affection. In the end, her return should never be your goal. Your goal is to move forward so completely that her presence no longer defines your worth. If she comes back and her actions prove she has grown, then perhaps her return can complement the life you've built. But if she hasn't, you let her go again without bitterness, without longing, and without regret. Because by then, so you've already won. She may return, but by then you will have changed. And that is the real victory. Because once you've built yourself into a man who stands on his own, her presence becomes optional, not essential. Remember, the goal was never to make her come back. The goal was to move so far forward that even if she does, you no longer need her to feel complete. That's when you know you've won. Because your worth is no longer in her hands, it's in yours.